Hello, thank you everyone for being here. I appreciate it. My name is Eric. I serve as the coordinator in the Office of Global Learning Initiatives here at FIU. You're here in our table. Awesome. Nice to see you. All right. My name is Eric, and I served as the coordinator in the Office of Global Learning Initiatives here at FIU. I'm very proud to be the organizer and moderator of today's panel discussion. Global learning is all about the voices of the periphery and the marginalized, those in our society and world who we metaphorically see out of the corner of our eyes, but don't really pay that much attention to. One of our global learning outcomes is global perspective, which is an ability of our students to analyze all the different viewpoints on an issue. The incarcerated and formerly incarcerated, who I will be referring to in my questions to the panel as returning citizens, not only seldom get asked their viewpoints, but are often legally forbidden from expressing their viewpoints in the democratic process of voting. This panel is happening today because of a gentleman named Pete, who I met at a conference in Louisiana this past summer. Pete is the founder of an organization called Strong Returns. And Strong Returns advocates for colleges and college students specifically taking the charge to make some change around prison reform. The reason that he calls on colleges and college students specifically is because colleges exist to educate the community, and returning citizens are members of our community with the capacity to greatly contribute to the economy and to solve social problems with the right tools. At a college, we have those tools. And then college students always have been the generation with the drive to do what is right. And today's group of college students is no different. And so that's what that call to action from the conference presentation about colleges needing to take the lead on this is what drove me to, in my office, to plan this event today. Another global learning outcome, because some of you still might be wondering, what does global learning have to do with this, is global engagement. Global engagement in FIU means a diverse group of people collaborating to solve complex problems. That's what's starting here in this room at FIU today when it comes to the issue of how we can better support returning citizens reentering from incarceration here in Miami and possibly other places as well. When you signed in, there was an opportunity to check off a box that says if you're interested in being involved in this type of initiative. This can mean one of many things. So, for example, we've been contacted by a group called Student Alliance for Prison Reform that has chapters at other schools, and perhaps there might be enough students who would want to start a chapter of something like that here as well. And then I'm going to make sure to stay in touch with all of the organizations represented on our panel and the special guests from our audience to talk about who they all are, to see how we can all work together. If they have volunteer opportunities, if they would all want to be involved with a club that's doing something at FIU. There are so many great experts and advocates in this room that I feel like that, what am I even doing up here moderating that all the people in this room are working on this topic so well. And I want to make sure that we all continue to work together, because it was a great half an hour before everyone started showing up where even the people from the various organizations who work on this issue were meeting each other for the first time and making new connections. And I really want to foster that. So if you didn't check that box, feel free to do so on the way out. And if you didn't sign in or signed in on only a professor sign-in sheet, if I have your name and email and you check, yeah, I want to be involved in something like this, when we're looking at starting a club or seeking volunteers for all of the organizations represented here today, I will definitely contact you. Faculty and staff are welcome and needed as well for this initiative, so make sure I know if you're a faculty or staff member interested in helping. I want to close on a very important note that global engagement is not just about working towards progress on issues that hit close to home. You're welcome to participate after leaving this room and get involved regardless of how incarceration has affected your life, and especially if it hasn't at all, which would be the case for me. And I make that point because that's what global engagement is all about, is making change on issues that affect everyone and are the right things to do. We have a great group of panelists today. I will let them introduce themselves and their work in a moment, but in brief, they are, I think, did I type this wrong? I think I have it right here, and I don't have it right on my paper. Malia, thank you. So I checked here. Malia Lindquist is from the Ladies Empowerment and Action Program, abbreviated as LEAP. John Eddings is from the Dr. Regina Bichern Correctional Transition Program, and Dr. Regina Bichern is in the audience with us today as well. Debbie Payne is from Eradicating the School to Prison Pipeline, abbreviated to ESTOP, and Chandra Whitehead is representing the Alternatives to Violence Project. And in addition to our panelists, we have several special guests representing other organizations that are doing great work in similar areas, and they are special guests / informal panelists, and I have them in the front row here. They're representing LEAP Workshop, which is no relation to LEAP, the Ladies Empowerment Program, but LEAP Workshop. So they're going to be good friends here today, and also Silent Victims of Crime. I'll be sure to extend the special members of our audience as a priority opportunity to participate and share their thoughts while we're all here. And then finally, the voices of everyone in attendance today is of great importance, and we'll definitely have Q&A, and I will provide you all the opportunity to ask any of our formal and informal panelists any questions. I want to make sure to plug a related event. You can consider it a follow-up to this event. I don't have flyers for it up there yet, and I can definitely email you about it if you check off that box, but you can write it down if you are really interested as well. So we're going to be showing a film screening of a documentary called First Degree, which looks at college education in the prison setting as well. And that's going to be March 28th. In this building, GL 100, downstairs, March 28th at 4 p.m., film screening of First Degree relating to prison education. So you might want to join us for that as well. All right. So that's my introduction. I would love to give each of our panelists a few minutes each to introduce themselves and the work of their organization. Malia. Okay.
So my name is Malia Lindquist, and I am the co-executive director for the Ladies Empowerment Action Program, which is a prison reentry program for women. By way of background, I feel like I have to confess here. I'm an attorney, and I actually was a prosecutor at one point. And one thing I liked about being a prosecutor is I really liked to win. But the thing that I didn't like was the sentencing, because it became very clear to me that the people who tended to go to trial or to plea out were the ones who couldn't afford a really expensive defense lawyer. And so when it came to the sentencing part, I would be like, I won. Oh, they won't do it again, so let them go. And that didn't really go over well with Kathy Rundle, who is wonderful, but she is a prosecutor at heart. And so my career there was not long-lived, but it did raise my awareness as to the inequities and injustice in the criminal justice system. And through different paths, I found myself, I've always been concerned with women, and I became a mentor with the Ladies Empowerment Action Program, which started by way of mission work, and the two founders went in and found out that the women needed much more than spiritual counseling. They needed jobs. And so they found out that, of course, convicted felons have a very difficult time, an almost impossible time actually getting the jobs. And they also learned that women, unlike male inmates, have a much different set of circumstances going in and coming out. And so for one thing, for example, is over 60% go in with mental illness. The large majority go in with a history of sexual abuse and domestic violence. Most of them were the caregivers for children, minor children, when they went in. And so their demographics and their needs were completely different. And so they started a partnership through Barry University and their Institute of Entrepreneurship to work with the women to create business plans, with the idea being if they couldn't get a job, if they couldn't get hired, maybe they could actually start a business, which of course is a tall order for anybody, much less somebody coming out of prison with at the most $50 in their pocket, no education, very little family support, a history of addiction, post-traumatic stress syndrome. So it's a tall order, and I'm not here to tell you that every graduate starts a business, but we do have many of the graduates who start businesses, and in the process, they gain many skills, employment skills. We also provide for them coping skills, therapy, and all sorts of workshops and classes to support growth and change. In addition to working with Barry University, we partner with different members of the community who actually come in and volunteer their time. And we have a mentorship program where professional women in the community come in and work one-on-one with the women before they get out to be sort of a cheerleader and a resource and continue to work with them afterwards. So that's a little bit about me and LEAP, the Ladies Empowerment Action Program.
Good morning. My name is John Eddings. I'm here representing Dr. Regina B. Sheeran Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution. But let me backtrack. In 1972, the United States Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty was unconstitutional as applied, and what happened was that each state government and the federal government changed their laws to apply to that right then. What Florida did was they commuted death penalties to life sentences that got nicknamed mandatory quarters. Each person that had that sentence had to serve a minimum of 25 years before being eligible for parole. Now, a few years later, they did reimpose the death penalty, and until 1995, still that same mandatory quarter was in effect. It's been replaced now with a life without parole or a death penalty. But now, getting back to what happened was in 1996, Ms. Marta Villacorte, who was the warden at South Railroad Correctional Institution, Reception Center, I believe it was, she's here today, also Dr. Sheeran's here, she realized that in the next year or so that some of the first people were going to start getting out that were serving this mandatory quarter. And then what had happened was the world had changed a lot. And she's wondering, how are these people going to transition properly? So what she did, she contacted Dr. Sheeran and asked her to put together a program that worked specifically in the transitionary measures for these people that were coming up for release. So they did put this program together. Now, in the first 4 or 5 years or so, the Department of Corrections chose who was coming in. 4 or 5 years later, the Parole Commission, now known as Florida Commission on Offender Review, decides every person who gets to go in. And it's not just people who had the murder charge or the life sentence, it's people who are under the old parole system. And that's another long thing I can get into here. There's actually 3 systems in the place of Florida right now that have come over the last few decades. The parole system, then another one was replaced with 65%, or if you're eligible for parole with the mandatory quarter, and then later it was 85% of your sentence and then no parole. Anyway, getting back on track, what this program does is that with co-facilitators, the inmates themselves, students who come in, it used to be a criminal justice class, now it's a psychology class led by Dr. Sheeran, and then the guest speakers who come in, seminars and workshops provided by them, and then lectures by Dr. Sheeran and others, the inmates get a chance to understand better about the changes that have been made over the years. Now, I have to tell you, I was an inmate there. I was sentenced to 904 years and 3 life sentences for robbery, kidnapping, and escape. I spent 4 years in the program. And I learned a lot about it. I learned some people, guest speakers would come in and talk about simple things like bankruptcy, rentals, nursing, things that I have no clue about. They can't bring phones in, but imagine what it was like to get a cell phone when I got out, how to use it. So as best can, they tell you a lot of the changes. Now, as a parolee, I go back in every Tuesday night, along with some other parolees, and what we do is we speak to the same people, and we tell them what we've learned out here, what worked, what didn't work, so that when they do get their opportunity, I remember when that happened with John. I remember when that happened with Grover. Oh, I remember what worked, what didn't work, so they can be better prepared, and that's the best we can do for them is better prepare them. There's a lot more that I'd like to go into, but this time I'd just like to pass it over. Oh, I do want to say this before I go on. Now, when Dr. Sheeran first brought this class together, she was teaching criminal justice right here at Florida International University. But when she retired, she still brought students go in each semester, now from the psychology class, and still from FIU, and go there for 2 semesters. Pass it on.
Sorry about that. My name's Debbie Payne, and a few years ago in 2011, I established the ESTOP Foundation. It is dedicated to eradicating the school-to-prison pipeline, and the mission states that we will do this by building a grassroots network of transformative schools and educational opportunities for youth who are underserved and unserved. So where did I get that? It was this vision in my head, and it all started when I taught in what we called the outreach schools in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. So I taught there for about 10 years and went to school and kept in contact with it, bringing teachers or pre-service teachers in there and so on. But while I was there, and the first day I walked into the school, I was totally shocked. I had never in my life heard of such a thing. All these kids clumped together and had been kicked out, expelled, whatever, incarcerated, and trying to return to school. And it was just like this invisible place in society that pretty much nobody knew about. And I was a teacher for years, and I was a master's student, and I was getting my doctorate, and they never talked about it. So anyhow, I noticed over the years that we had a wonderful experience. I got to know my students. After I thought I knew everything for a couple of years, I learned that no, I had to start listening. We built relationships. We did just wonderful things in the school. They wanted to come to school and all this, but I thought, I have to know more. So when I went back to know more, it turns out I found out, and this is what we're working on now because it's such a huge problem. The school-to-prison pipeline is pretty much starts for a child, normally black or Hispanic, where they first get kicked out of class, for example, and then it just continues down this route of no return, basically. But they're what I like to call their educational trajectory, which to most of us is, you go to kindergarten, first grade, second, blah, 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 and all this stuff. There may be something, you might make a B or, an F or whatever. But their trajectory gets so disrupted, and it's so disrupted for years, just, oh my goodness, trauma. Everything is wrong in this little child's life. And then, let's say they get incarcerated. Many do. How do they return? There are no structures or infrastructures or anything set up so that the child, first of all, can come back to school. They want to go to school. Their parents want them to. So there's all these stereotypes going around out there that they don't care. They do. We need to set up these routes so they can re-enter, and the schools or whatnot that they're trying to re-enter to, using from their own goals, they're ready for them. They want them. They're not afraid. So getting back into and then having this seamless route that we can navigate these kids through so they can finish school, go to college, and do the things they need to. So some of our programs, we have this big vision, but each little piece, the little programs we've started, and let's say the XQ Super School Project, which we applied to, I don't know if we'll get it because 1 million people applied for that, but we have a vision that there are little offices or whatever you want to call them in each school, ready to work with the kids, help them re-enter, and then a resource, outreach, teaching, learning, whatever you want to call it, re-entry hub, which is really a high school. It's a vibrant place for kids that need this, and they deserve it. So that's another story. But pretty much all our little programs, plus our goals we write for bigger schools, are either part or all of this vision. So that's pretty much it. I better stop because I'll talk all day. Thanks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Chandra Whitehead. I'm a doctoral student here at FIU in Adult Education and Human Resource Development. I am pleased to be on the panel. I've heard about all of these organizations. I'm involved with eStop, and I've seen a lot of the results of Dr. Shern's program because I also volunteer at Everglades Correctional Institution as well as Homestead. And my program is called Alternatives to Violence Project. And we do conflict resolution training workshops. But that sounds, very short-sighted because what we really do is empathy work, communications work, community building, relationship building, and there's so many different elements that go into our program. And just to give you an understanding of the program, Alternatives to Violence Project was started in 1975 at Greenhaven Prison. It was founded by a group of Quakers, as well as some incarcerated people who felt like there was a lot of violence happening in that particular prison and what could be done about it. So they came up and they designed this workshop program that over the years has grown to over 40 states in several different countries. It's an international program. We have an international meeting every 2 years in some wonderful site in other countries that I hope to go to one year. And we have a national gathering here in the United States. And we don't just have programs in prisons, even though that's where it started, and that's where the bulk of our work is, especially here in the United States. But in other countries, they do it with different tribes that are experiencing war. They do it in Australia, primarily in primary school, to do the workshops. In Philadelphia, they've done it in charter schools. So it's a program that can work some of everywhere. And actually, I did 2 workshops here in the spring of 2012. I applied with the Center for Leadership and Service, and we did workshops with students on Alternatives to Violence Project. And what I found is that these are skills that a lot of people don't address, soft skills that people can use in any situation, because conflict is an ever-present part of our society. Violence is an increasing part of our society. Anger, unresolved trauma, as mentioned before, PTSD, family issues that people deal with, and they don't always have the tools. You know, we're not always given a handbook when we're growing up, and it's, this is what you do when somebody makes you mad. Nobody has that book. So people do what they learn in their own family or their own communities when handling conflict. But there's so many different techniques out there that we can learn. And even myself, every time I do a workshop, I learn something different. We learn about different ways of violence. Everybody says, well, maybe I'm not a violent person, but you do violent things. You know, when you give somebody the silent treatment, that's a form of violence, because what you're doing is shutting down communication, and you're breaking down the types of opportunities you have to build a relationship there. So those are the kinds of things we talk about in our workshop. And our workshop is a 3-day-long workshop. We usually go in at Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. It's about 22 hours. And we have inside facilitators and outside facilitators. I'm an outside facilitator, but we have at each facility, we have about 20 or 30 inside facilitators who help us also run the workshops. And then a person can sign up again to come and do an advanced workshop that we will offer. And then they can sign up if they want to eventually to become a facilitator and be a trainer in our program. At Everglades and at HCI, we do about 5 or 6 weekends per year. And the program in South Florida is run by Dr. Dawn Addy, who was a faculty here at FIU for many years. She just retired last year, and she's also our national president of AVP. So we have a strong connection here in South Florida, but we only have about 4 or 5 outside facilitators, and we go in and conduct these workshops so that we can try to help people gain skills and become better neighbors, because people do return home.
Great, thank you, everyone. So the first question that I'm going to ask, I would like each panelist to respond to in order, kind of like we just did, but then each subsequent question will be just as many or as few panelists who have something to say on that question in whatever order, you know, works for them. So our introductory question for everyone, and now, you know, this whole theme of this event is supporting second chances and supporting returning citizens coming back from incarceration. So I'll ask each panelist, what is the #1 greatest barrier facing returning citizens today?
So that was a hard question for me because there are so many. And the natural thing to say is jobs, because for our women coming out, they're under the impression that the first thing they need to do is get a job, which is a very tall order. But then I thought about that. A job's useless if you have long-standing mental health issues. It's useless if you're addicted to substances, because no matter how long you've been in jail, if they haven't been treated, they are going to rear their ugly head when they get out. There was a recent series in the Miami Herald that addressed prison conditions for women at the Lowell Correctional Facility in Central Florida, which is the country's largest facility for women. And of course, I come from a skewed perspective, because there are programs out there for returning citizens, not enough. Almost zero are for women. And so for me, my view is that it needs to be a holistic approach. Right now, out of the 100,000 women in prison in Florida, 14% get any sort of rehabilitation or counseling or reentry services, 14%. So when they come out, yes, they need jobs, but some of our women come out and they get a job, it's usually sort of a lame job in a call center with a lot of other people who have gotten out of prison and may not be dealing with their things. They have to deal with the fact that their kids are usually in foster care somewhere. And so there needs to be a holistic approach to dealing with women coming out of prison and with men coming out of prison where, yes, as a community we address the job issue, but as a community we're also addressing the mental illness and the addiction. And so in my perfect world, the one thing is everything, because it does work. I mean, our program, the recidivism rate, which is the rate of return to prison within 3 years, is 4%. Statewide, for women, it's 17% without services, and for men, it's almost 30%. So it works and it's needed, and it's not just jobs, although yes, it's jobs, but it needs to be a holistic vision and approach.
Like her, I had a hard time deciding on exactly what was the number one thing. Because the obvious thing is to pick a job. Because if you can't work, you can't pay rent, you can't go buy food. Well, actually, for a while you can get food stamps. But how are you going to pay rent? How are you going to do all the different things? And I look up at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the different things, trying to figure out what the different categories were, how it actually applied. I thought about the relationships, the social skills, and things like this. And I'm going to tell you, personal experience, social skills are hard for me. This Saturday I've been out 3 years. But I still deal with not knowing what to say and how to say it and to represent myself properly. But the one thing that I nailed it down to, and I agree with you, you've got to work. I mean, that's a no-brainer. But to me, something more integral than that, it's integral to being successful, that and other things, goes to self-esteem. I was taught that everybody, and once I was taught this, I recognized it, that everybody who is incarcerated is low on self-esteem. You don't have confidence in yourself. You can't believe in yourself to do a lot of things. So one of the things, if you could do on the inside, even before they got out, is work on ways to build that self-esteem up so that when you go, I can do this. I did this. I can do that. I can do something else. Okay, it's not good right now, but I've done other things that was difficult. I just got to do the same thing. I've got to be determined. I've got to believe in myself. I've got to do whatever research. You have to start believing in yourself before you can go further. So I don't know how good an argument other people would agree with that, but I just know personally that the more I can believe in myself in one situation, it's easier for me to apply myself in something else. And that's where I think about that.
Well, I agree with both of the first two answers, and I had a really hard time with this question too. Being a teacher and an educator, I feel like education is a barrier for sure. But if you think about it deeper, which I usually do for long periods of time, and I go back to what is this, where did this come from? I think the greatest barrier is prejudice, honestly, from not the incarcerated child or adult, but from the community. And the prejudice leads to these stereotypical negative views of someone, no matter their age. Even a child has been incarcerated or even suspended, but especially incarcerated. So the prejudice, I believe, spans all of these things because we all started out with something and kept backing up. And then on the flip side, the greatest barrier for the youth that, in my case, but I think all people, that comes from the prejudice they face inside and then outside when they try to return, is their lack of hope. The oppressive education they're given, and then the isolation. And all these things just affect people so much, and I just was with it for so long in the school. And it just pretty much comes from prejudice that we've learned or maybe not unlearned. I had to unlearn it myself because I was privileged, thought I knew everything when I went into this school. And when I finally saw that, what was going on in my, what I had learned, I had to unlearn it. And it's hard. So that's my answer.
And my answer goes along the lines of what Debbie said, and I agree it was a difficult question. But stigmatization and the misunderstandings that society has about our criminal justice system. I used to teach at a prison before I came to grad school, so it's been about 10 years now that I've been doing different work in prisons. And, when you start conversations with people about what do you do, and I've had several arguments with people about, well, why should my money go towards educating people in prison? Or why should people who are coming out of prison get jobs? Or I don't want somebody like that living in my neighborhood. And the stigmatization and the misunderstandings that people have about who's involved in the criminal justice system and what that really means is what does prevent jobs. That's what prevents jobs. Because a lot of times there's no solid reason for denying a person access to housing or access to a job other than a stigmatized idea about what this person may be like based on one incident. And if we all were judged on one or two incidents in our lives, I'm sure we wouldn't make it very far either. But their incidents are more well documented. It has been tried by jury, therefore it must be true, it must be real, and it must be an account of who they are as a person. So I think the ideas that people hold about incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated returning citizens, is what really is the main barrier in our society.
Thank you. And that walks me right into something I want to give everyone a greater chance to talk about. Now, remember, for the rest of the questions I'm going to ask before I get to the audience, it does not have to be in order and as many or as few as you can answer as you want. But going right off of Chandra's point, I want to ask a kind of multi-part question here, which is why is putting resources into the issue of supporting returning citizens the right thing to do, both for the people coming out of prison, also for society at large, for the individual and society? Why is it the right thing to do? And how would you respond to people who say what they have said to Chandra, which is, with the limited amount of resources that exist in society, why should it be going to this cause over some other individuals who might not have ended up in the criminal justice system?
Easy, much easier than the last question. Easy. It costs over $50 billion a year. That's what states spend to imprison people. It costs much, and that's not even counting the cost in social services when we count for the fact of children who need to go into foster care and the other costs of social services to support those children who are left behind, not to mention the pipeline that the other panelists talk about, because you're more likely to be a child's more likely to be incarcerated if their parent is incarcerated. So just from a dollar and cents perspective, it makes sense. Now, the other side of the coin is it's the right thing to do. I don't do this, nobody who goes into this does it out of a financial perspective. Everybody who's involved in the reentry services and the prison reform movement, we all do it because it's the right thing to do. The vast majority of people who go into prison go in there, they're already marginalized and disadvantaged. Now, the former prosecutor in me is going to say is there are a lot of people who have suffered from addiction and domestic violence and sexual battery who don't steal or do kidnapping or burglary, which are all the things that women have done in my program. They're not just victims, but I think the vast majority of the people who are incarcerated do take responsibility for their decisions. But there's no denying the fact that most of them go in and they're already disadvantaged. So it's all the way around, it makes sense. That's my 2 cents. Or $50 billion worth?
Well, one thing that we also have to keep in mind is, yes, fiscally is very irresponsible. Most people don't realize how much we're spending per incarcerated person. And if we did really pay it attention, we should get upset about that number of $50 billion. You know, in Florida, the average cost is about $30,000 per person a year, you know, and that can be a college education. And with elementary school and K through 12, we're not spending anywhere near that amount per student. And America feeds us this idea that there's limited resources, but there's a lot of things that they spend unlimited money on, that there are blank checks made out for. But when it comes to, you know, issues that concern people who are often in poverty and have disadvantaged backgrounds, then there's a limit on resources. So also you have to think about, it's not a limit for some businesses. Prison is a business. Even though most of the prisons are run by the state and operated by the state, there are many prisons that are run by private companies. And even with the prisons that are run by the state, they often subcontract out private services. So uniforms are being provided by some company. Food is being provided by a company. Telephone service is being provided by a company. So for some people, it's in their best interest, you know, to keep the prison population high, to keep people incarcerated longer, and to give out harsher, longer punishments. So while, many of us feel like it's fiscally irresponsible, some people feel like it's the fiscally responsible thing to do.
Absolutely. Well, and Sean, I'm sorry, I'd give the other panelists a chance to talk, but the interesting thing is that when it comes to the disadvantaged population, there's not enough resources, and the motto is we want less government, less government. Yet if you look at the Department of Corrections, what's going on there is not less government, it's more government. And so the idea of less incarceration is really aligned with all the entire political spectrum. It's less government.
Well, I want to back up a little further, as usual, but when I saw that question, I thought the question was, why is putting resources into reentry right? And so I thought, because we have the resources to do this. We are privileged. Most of us haven't been incarcerated. So we have the resources, and I listed 3 things, and I think I still agree with them. We have the resources to share hope, and we have some programs where if you go in and one time and mentor and volunteer with kids, you have shared hope. Unbelievably huge. And we have the resources to transform education. We all know how to do it. We could even, this wasn't asked, but I was thinking about this too. We could even, if we had to think of one law and one policy that we might, dream up and pass. I was thinking, we define a lot of things as discriminatory in our society nowadays, and so you can do this or that because you'd be discriminated against. I'm thinking we could define youth incarceration as discriminatory practice. So that gets our minds to going. Every time humans have a law, you hear about a law or maybe even executive decisions like recently Mr. President Obama set out there. If we defined youth incarceration as discriminatory practice, then the school boards would be required to eliminate all the discriminatory barriers to youth's successful reentry and to their successful educational trajectories, because it would be discriminatory. So we have the resources to do that. And then that would mean if we did that and other things like sharing hope or empowering youth, the things I always talk about, then we would be transforming our own minds. Our prejudices would be slowly being reduced. That's just how our minds work. And also, finally, one other thing is we have the resources. In fact, we know a lot now about adolescent brain development and trauma. So we have the resources, not necessarily monetary, but those are resources that we all have, even if it's a teeny piece in each one of us.
One thing I'd like to add to that is that, true, it's a better investment because now if we get it straightened with people being rehabilitated and work that out, then we can start putting money in better spots. This is something you brought up too. And you talk about the right thing, but here's the thing, because the question asked says, why is putting resources into this issue the right thing to do for returning citizens and society at large? Here's the thing. One of the reasons it's the right thing is because if better investments are made about rehabilitating men and women while they're inside, then they're more apt to come out and be productive citizens doing the right thing instead of the wrong thing. So that means that there's less stealing, there's less robbing, rape, there's a lot of things that's less. Is crime going to be eliminated? No, it's not. But it can be reduced. And by using your head better about what goes into it, it's just a better investment. Not just, even if you want to forget about the inmates themselves, we're not doing it for them, we're doing it for us. We can make the world a better place for us. If there's no other reason, you can do it that way. I want to add one other thing to what you said, though. One of the problems I've had a couple of years ago, I had to look for a new apartment. And I had to tell people my background. And listen, as a young man, I went to one of the worst prisons in the state of Florida. Over the years, I was in two of the worst prisons in the country between Florida and California. And I've been through some bad times. But the 2.5 months I looked for the apartment was the most stressful period of my entire life because I had a deadline to get it. I had to get it in my budget, and every time I had to answer the question, have I been in trouble before? And how am I going to hide what I did? So helping people get past, invest in ways to help them, not only with the employment, to get past these things, I can take from experience that's a tough one and a big one.
All right. Thank you all. So, Dr. Payne, you did something that leads me into a new question now. You both mentioned the scientific knowledge that we have now, but you also mentioned President Obama, who last year became the first president to visit a federal correctional facility, which, if I may inject any opinion as a moderator, is fascinating that he was the first one, considering that the federal correction system is run by the federal government and the president is in charge of the federal government. So the fact that that never happened before 2015 is phenomenally disappointing to me. So the fact that that just happened, among other things happening right now, why is 2016 both a year to be optimistic about reform in this area and a year to be excited about taking action and doing something about this?
Well, I would say for the same reason that President Obama did visit the federal prison. There has been at the federal and the state level efforts to do away with a lot of the craziness of the minimum mandatories, which are, a whole nother subject. We have bipartisan efforts in Florida, which has some of the harshest sentencing in the country. And so I feel like in a political time when there's not agreement on anything, I feel like we're finding common ground. I mean, even from the conservative religious sector to the fiscally conservative to the social liberals, there's just this one area that everybody is seeing that it doesn't make sense, and in fact, it's an embarrassment to the United States what's happening. And then also just from a popular perspective, we are seeing in the media, from Orange is the New Black and some of the other movies and shows out there where people who are returning citizens and have been incarcerated have previously been anonymous. Now they're being portrayed in maybe not always realistic ways, but in ways where they're humanized. And it reminds me a little bit of what preceded a lot of what happened with gay rights and gay marriage. A lot of that was preceded by popular culture and the media, which started portraying those relationships in a positive light. And I see that happening also with people who have been incarcerated. So that's all good news.
So exciting. What's exciting in 2016? For me, it's the awareness of all of this seems to be up. People are aware, which is really, to me, the first step in your mind towards understanding or advocacy or any of that. So the awareness is up, and I think it's great that President Obama did a couple of things for the juveniles or the youth. He banned solitary confinement for juveniles at the federal level, and then the Supreme Court actually banned mandatory life sentences for the juveniles based on Miller versus Alabama. But it was interesting because I showed the kids at TGK, which is a correctional center that we go in and mentor the youth that are actually direct filed as adults, but they are youth. And so I was showing them this, the ban on solitary confinement and the life sentences for juveniles, and they were saying, which they're very astute. I learned a lot. I learned so much when I am around kids, and they were astute, saying, well, you can ban certain things, but then how will it play out with the people on the ground? Which is true. So we get into these really interesting conversations when we talk about whatever issues there are when we're working with the kids. But I believe that this awareness and all the stuff going on about it in our society is exciting.
In 2016, I'm excited for the possibility of the return of Pell Grants to incarcerated people and formerly incarcerated people. Last year, the U.S. Department of Education put out a call to different prisons and universities and places to apply to be a part of a pilot project. Because in the mid-1990s, under the Clinton administration, Pell Grants were taken away from incarcerated people. And there used to be lots of colleges and universities that had full programs that they would run inside of facilities, or correspondence programs that they would run, and incarcerated people would apply for the Pell Grant just like everybody else do their FAFSA, and then they could get that money in order to pay for their classes. So that's how a lot of people used to get AA degrees, bachelor's degrees, and come out of prison with a degree, but that was taken away in the mid-1990s. So last year, the U.S. Department of Education said that they were going to start back looking at reinstating the Pell Grant. So right now, they're doing pilot projects at different universities. So I think that's going to be a big part of prison reform, because if people are eligible to start getting some of those benefits to cover the cost of classes, then that will bring education programs back to facilities, or even allow people, once they return home, to be able to enroll in university.
For me, the exciting part about this open discussion about prison reform in 2016 is that they're actually talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's easy for us to sit out here and talk about things that we can all find things that aren't working right. But to get somebody to actually do something about it is a whole different game right here. And so now the people running for president are falling behind on what Obama said, or however way it's happening. It's more open discussion about it, and there is some needs. They do need to fix it. So that's the exciting thing. I thought it was actually in the 80s that the Pell Grants were taken. I didn't know it was that late. It was in the 90s. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you that what happened was that the people who were invoking all the changes in laws and starting with the warehousing began in the 80s, and they came up with a theory. If you could go look it up in the newspaper now, nothing works. That's what they called it. Nothing works. That was one of the most stupidest, irate things that I ever saw. And it's proven because, in fact, Janet Reno was one of the people who came out and talked about it later when she was the Attorney General, was that almost immediately after they took away, okay, let me backtrack. What they started doing was building more prison, just warehousing the individuals in there, and one of the ways they paid for it was taking away the money that went into education. They said, well, why are we going to do it? Because nothing works. And then almost overnight, what happened was the recidivism rate jumped up 40%. Now, I can't remember the Bureau of Statistics, whatever it is for the federal government. If you look at them, they're the one that have statistics. Almost immediately after they changed their mind, almost 40%. But I remember one of the big things was that I remember one politician says, well, listen, my daughter's having a hard time getting a Pell Grant, but this guy's in prison and he can get one. So I can remember reading about that in the 80s. All started with that. Nothing works, and it built up to all that. But things do work. And the exciting thing about it is people talking about it, and they're saying, you know what, we got to be able to do something better. That's what's exciting to me.
All right. I'm going to combine my last two questions so we can move into hearing from everyone in the room and and some interaction. So it is, so John, you mentioned your hard time having to answer that question on apartment applications. There's a movement, ban the box, is a movement to remove the question of have you been convicted of a crime from job applications. So going along that line, I would ask what one law or policy, if passed or enacted, would have the greatest impact on helping returning citizens upon reentry, whether it's ban the box or something else, and or you all can answer either question. Since we're here at FIU, how can colleges and college students specifically play a role in this support? Obviously including the Pell Grant situation, but perhaps other things as well.
Well, I already said the one about the law, the policy defining youth incarceration as discriminatory practice. I already said that one. But I think as far as colleges and students, I believe, being an educator again, that we should put reentry education or something like to that effect into our course syllabi across the campus, because I thought about several courses I'd taught or I'd taken. That is relevant to almost every single course you're in, especially with the big push now on the campuses for community engagement, volunteerism, and course credit internships and things like that, which we do at eStop. We invite college students to join us in various ways like that. One step further, besides the volunteering and the community service requirements in the syllabi and whatnot, is the what we're working towards a reentry trajectory, so to speak, with the kids, and we are implementing mentoring along the way. So our vision is to match to link up each child that is incarcerated and ends up in one of the juvenile justice facilities, link each one with eStop. We match them with a mentor who actually becomes their mentor and stays their mentor as they leave, which is the big place that everybody waves goodbye and you lose them, as they get released and leave and go back to their goals, their family and school, whatever that we've set up or they've set up. They have this mentor that they can call on throughout the process, and mentors supposedly stay with their mentee for at least a year. That would be great, because that's what we're plugging for, because that's a consistency piece that a lot of the kids are missing as far as having that extra support, with them along the way. So.
Okay, so the ban the box, that makes sense, except I don't have statistics on this. I'm just not sure that it works based on our experience at LEAP. We recently we have a whole list of employers that say that they will hire ex-offenders. Target is one of them, and yay for them, except recently we had a recent graduate who by all accounts would be the ideal candidate. She's actually one of the few ex-offenders who come out. She's already had a college degree. Her offense was not having to do with theft or fraud, which is usually a red flag. It was trafficking. She presents very well. She's articulate. She got through the interview, and it went up to corporate, and she ended up not getting the job. And I'm thinking, really? I mean, if she's not getting the job, who's getting the job? Because she was infinitely more qualified than any other person coming out of prison, and more qualified than most of the people applying there, to be quite honest. And so I've thought about this. So fine, they get in because we ban the box, and they get in, and I'm concerned that they're still not getting hired. And I've wondered, again, maybe this is my cynical legal background, but if I was doing human resources for Target, or if I was a manager of an apartment building and I see somebody that comes in with a record, my first response is liability. Because what happens if you have 5 candidates equally competent and qualified, one of them is an ex-offender, and then something awful happens? That's a lawsuit, because the plaintiff's lawyer is going to say, hey, you employer, you were negligent because you knowingly hired somebody that is higher risk, and that's why X, Y, and Z happened. And so I have not seen anything in the literature, and I would be interested in hearing opinions from people in the audience, maybe with more experience, but that if there was some sort of immunity, or at least limited immunity for landlords and for employers, that in addition to some of the other sort of lame incentives, there are some lame incentives of, there's a federal bonding program, there is some limited tax credits which are almost impossible to get. There's window dressing. Our women try to use those and the employers try to take advantage, and it's a joke. So in addition to ban the box, we need to have more real incentives, real tax incentives that make it easier to hire ex-offenders. And we need to have some sort of limited liability. So in a tight job market where there's 10 people applying for a position who don't have a record, to give some sort of assurance to the person making these decisions that it's not going to come back to bite them a year down the road if something happens. So those are my thoughts on that. Oh, and as far as involvement, so, I mean, gosh, I'm on my soapbox. So easy, and in so many ways. There's advocacy because there's problems in the system at every level, from who gets arrested to who gets prosecuted to the sentencing to what happens once they're in prison. There's injustice to what happens when they get out to what's happening with the children. And if you're not the person, if you're a person who's just better at advocacy, you could be out there lobbying your lawmakers. If you're better working one-on-one, there's unlimited possibilities for that. And if you're better at making money, make money and just give us some. So we have something for everyone.
There's actually two questions asked right there. In regards to the first one about what law or policy, I'm not going to go into a real long thing about what I believe is the best way to do it, but the short version is that within reason, nobody should leave incarceration without having some kind of training. Nobody should leave without being able to operate a computer. Everybody should have some kind of a vocational skill or something where they can support themselves out there. And there needs to be classes, workshops that teach you the things about social skills, how to deal, how to represent yourself, how to talk, how to make resumes. But getting back to the college students, well, talking about FIU, you can go to the psychology class that goes out to Everglades Correctional Institution with Dr. Shern, Dr. Regina B. Shern's Corrections Transition Program, and deal with men who all have served 35, 40 years in life, and deal with those people doing the same thing in the transition areas. Then there's other organizations. Any of these right here probably would love to have volunteers volunteer their time. You learn more about it, and maybe not spend all your time with one. Spend some time over, find out what they're doing. Or volunteer, spend some time learning over here. And then so you can develop your own concepts about what's right, what works best, what doesn't. And then maybe someday you'll move out on your own and lead an organization of your own on the concepts that you built with your experience like that. And in the process, you will not only learn, but you'll be helping other people. You'll be helping the people that help people, and you'll be helping the people that receive the help. Such a good idea.
I like that we have a Common Core for public schools in Florida, Common Core for people getting out of prison. But we do have, the Department of Corrections does have thinking for change and some things that are required. Again, lame, not meaningful. I mean, there needs to be real discussion about what's being taught, like computer literacy is huge. I love that idea. Like, by law, people coming out of prison need to have a minimum set of education so that they can function in a meaningful way when they get out. I love that.
I agree. Education and volunteerism, especially on the part of our young people in college. Many movements in the United States often do start with young people. They often are supported by young people who have flexible schedules, who may not have a family to attend to, who may not have, a big-time CEO job that they're afraid to lose, because many grown-ups don't get involved because they have things to lose. You are afraid of what the people at your church might think. You're afraid of what the people at your job may think. You're afraid if you speak out too much, you may end up in a predicament where you're going to end up losing your income. So a lot of people don't want to get involved and voice out, but young people often don't have those same kind of constraints. So think about, what are you doing with this time in your life where you don't have those type of constraints and you can make a contribution and not have to worry about, are you going to lose your job or whatever, because of the views that you have and because of the involvement that you have. And there's many different levels to get involved with. If you like young people, go ahead and work with Dr. Payne. If you don't really like the sound of gates clicking behind you when you go in to volunteer, then maybe you work with LEAP, with the people after they return home. If you really enjoy working with women, you don't want to work with guys, come on over to HCI with me. If you like working with males and don't really want to work with the females, go over to ECI. And think about the types of places where you are putting your efforts every year. A lot of sororities and organizations and clubs do the exact same types of volunteer opportunities every year. Okay, you're going to do your beach cleanup. You're going to collect your canned goods for the homeless shelter. So maybe this year you think about expanding your efforts and your community programs to involve some of the types of prison programs or prison reform programs or something that impacts incarceration. There are families of incarcerated people that need help. There are school children who are on the edge of being in a correctional facility that are dealing with suspension. So even if going to schools and reading to young children is helping with the school to prison pipeline. Okay, so working with addicts at different centers, that's helping with the prison pipeline as well. So just think about different ways that you can engage yourself with the topic. Even if, going into a prison and volunteering is not your thing, you don't want to do that. There's other ways to impact the whole reform movement.
And can I just add one thing? We do have an in-prison component, and I find we do get a lot of people, I don't know if it's because of that show, Orange is the New Black or what, but we get college kids who want to come into prison. And quite honestly, sometimes it's great, but sometimes they're of limited assistance, quite honestly. A 20-year-old, oftentimes there's not a lot they can do meaningfully, and they're just can be more of a nuisance trying to make them feel like they're doing something important when they're just kind of a drag on our already limited resources time-wise. And so as the executive director for a small nonprofit, I would say that, yes, work one-on-one with kids and people in the community, but also I know that we must be similar to other nonprofits. We need young people who are hip and happening, who know how to do social media. I need somebody to do data entry. We need people to do administrative tasks. So honestly, to really be effective, it's all of these behind-the-scenes things that make a nonprofit be able to do what they're doing that need to get done. And yes, it's super cool and interesting, in my opinion. I like hearing that click, I guess, to go in and work one-on-one with people. But it's more helpful to do these other things that keep the wheels turning.
Well, I need to add before we stop. I see you there trying to stop us. Actually, eStop seeks every single university student that would come our way, because we have a philosophy of servant, leader, intern. So you have every one of you, no matter what your age, and especially university students, we want you to come and become a mentor for our students, because they need to see and hear from you, and because we have so much to learn from the university students. And come with me one time and I'll show you what I mean. Okay?
And so
our sign-up sheets are over there.
You have your own, you have your own applications over there?
I laid them over there.
Okay, so her application's over there, and I'm also going to be collecting all of the volunteer involvement opportunities from all the groups represented here for what's most useful for them, for college students. And as long as your email address is on our main sign-in sheet and you say you want to be involved, we'll make sure to get that out to you. So the way I'd like to transition to a brief question and answer session is I would like to give each of our VIP guests that are representing other organizations that do similar work a chance to introduce just themselves and what their organization does briefly. And then if we have a couple of questions, our formal panel and our VIP guests would both be welcome to respond to the question if they have something to say.
My name is Paulette Pfeiffer, and I'm the Executive Director of Silent Victims of Crime, which is a program for children of inmates. And I must say, the speakers today were wonderful. I really appreciated the information that you gave us. And I'm very impressed by Mr. Eddings for how proficient a speaker you are, having been out only 3 years. I applaud you. We work with over 1,000 children of inmates. These children have all a parent or two parents in prison. One day we take them to visit the mom. Next day we take them to visit dad. We have several students here that have been with us to the prisons, and we would like to please invite you. All of you are invited to come on a prison visit and mentor a child when they're going to visit their parents. And I would love to meet with all of you individually, because I think we should be meeting on getting this forward. And thank you so much. And for all of you, good luck with everything you do in your life, and please offer yourselves for community service for all of our children and adults that are inside. Thank you.
I think I can get this thing in less than 4 minutes. My name is Don Carr. I'm the founder and CEO of a Florida nonprofit called LEAP Workshop. By the age of 27, 28, I had 5 or 6 successful small businesses that I ran and or sold. I'm 34 now. Today I currently run with my partner here 7 different small service-based businesses in South Florida. And I don't say that to boast or gloat. I say that because 3 years ago I was inmate car DC 15725. See, that's the power in my story. That's the power in my partner's story, is we were formerly incarcerated. And I taught this program, it's called the LEAP Workshop, as an inmate. I was at a reentry center in Pahokee, Florida, and there's always a need for programs. There's a need for programs, but then there's not a need for programs, and some of you understand what I mean. And my inmate job was a PC support class to teach the guys how to use computers and Microsoft Word, Excel, Office. Right? My civilian boss was a guy by the name of Ed Nichols. Called him Coach. Some of you are familiar with him. He was at Everglades and a couple other institutions down here in Miami for years. And he knew my story. We've all got a story, right? And he said, Don, we got to create this little entrepreneurship program here in prison for these guys. You're getting out soon, and you got to share what you know. You got to share this knowledge that you have, because you can help some of these guys. And at that time, I had the perspective of, no, not those guys. I'm different than those guys. I'm not part of that same fold. They don't deserve to know or learn what I know and I worked so hard to get. It took them 3 months to convince me to put on a small workshop at Sago Palm. No. And finally he says, you know what, Don, if you don't do it for any other reason, he said, do me a personal favor and do it for me. I couldn't tell the guy no. I said, all right, man, you got me. Okay. And 28 guys were in the first class. We had a waiting list of 78 within a week. And when I looked out into the eyes of those 28 guys, I saw something and experienced something I never saw or experienced before. And it was hope. It's palpable. And hope took on a new meaning to me, helping other people excel. HOPE. So it's kind of by accident that LEAP was born. When I got out about 3 years ago, I started this nonprofit. Today we have 14 guys that are either employed by us or employed by some of our affiliate companies that we work with. We've helped 7 guys start small businesses that currently run small businesses, and it's their sole means of income. They support themselves and their families off of these small service-based businesses. We're going to be on CBS 12 News in about 2 weeks. They did a piece on us about a month ago because they saw the power in the story and the positiveness in the story. and still trying to get this program back in the Florida Department of Corrections. You see, I taught it as an inmate in blue with a white stripe down my pant leg. But I'm yet to get it back. I've yet to be able to get it back into FDOC. I've been beating down the doors of Tallahassee for 2.5, almost 3 years. And I thought they'd be beating down my door because our program is of no cost to the Florida Department of Corrections. It's a 6-week program. The first 2 weeks, we're an accredited facilitator of the Anthony Robbins Empowerment Program for inmates. It's a big program. First 2 weeks, we get into the tough stuff, right? Why you do what you do, who you are, how you can change your life, how you can change your blueprint, how you can create a new identity for yourself. Those are the things that are going to matter. How do you change it? What do you do? So we talk about that twice a week for 2 weeks. Right now we do correspondence stuff. And the last 4 weeks we spend on small business. How to start a small service-based business. Nothing glamorous, maybe house cleaning or commercial cleaning, janitorial, lawn cutting, landscaping, painting, something that doesn't take a whole lot of skill or it doesn't take a degree, right? But something you can earn more than $8.05 an hour if you're lucky enough to get one of those jobs, that you can make more than a living wage or at least a living wage, which is $12 for a single person with no kids. It's a far cry from 8. A lot of these people have kids. And Israel, the guy that interviewed us from CBS 12 News, he's actually an attorney. They sent the big dogs for us, right? He said, part of the interview, I said, Israel, it's easy to say, let the courts deal with it. Let the judges and the police deal with it. It's not in my backyard type of thing. I got news for you guys. When they get out, they don't go and sleep on the bench of the judge's courtroom. They don't take up residence of the steps of the police department. They come right back to our community, our mother's community, our grandmother's community, our children's community, the very communities from which they left. They're our neighbors again. This is a community issue. It's not a judge issue or a police issue, because I'll tell you right now, we are much greater than any judge or police officer out there. Bottom line. Doing what we do is much more powerful than any other organization out there. We are it. Okay? And I said, Israel, as a homeowner or a civilian or, somebody in society, we should want to hire, Jay's Landscaping, the ex-convict, to cut our grass. He goes, well, yeah, Don, but that's hard. I said, no, it's not. It's not harder than him crawling through your window at night. And this guy's jaw was on the floor. And I didn't say anything. So it was like 20 seconds of this awkward silence, because that's the bottom line. Either we empower somebody or we disempower them. Either way, we take a stance. It's a big deal. I said, it's not that hard, Israel. When you empower somebody to do better and be better, you pay them $20 to cut your grass. That's the difference. That's where the rubber meets the road. And I think after this, we're going to get some calls from FDOC. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. And thanks for coming all the way from Palm Beach to join us and talk to students today. So there's time for maybe just a handful of questions, 1, 2, 3 questions. You can let me know if you have them for a specific moderator, a specific panelist, and if they're not specific, maybe just 1 or 2 people can respond so that we can get the couple of hands that I saw here.
Loud enough.
Well, for recording purposes,
Okay.
you can do it, but maybe not so close to this thing.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Yeah. I appreciate, what you guys do for our system.
One thing that I know that is going on in our world today is like history repeats itself. Sometimes, and there's nothing more powerful than the power of the people, which is us. So you could say government, police officer, whatever, but at the end of the day, it's all really up to us. So history repeats itself. We did something good. We created prisons to keep the bad people off the, our streets, to protect us normal individuals, whatever. But then everything, got forged and lies and things, and then it's businesses now, and I see people, going in for murder, coming out 3 years later, and then a person stealing a car, they get like 25 years, or something like that, just for two like stealing car attempts. And one thing we never ask when somebody does something like that is like how and why. Why did you do that? How did you do that? We're always like, you stole a car, you're bad, you're going to jail. And that's like something that's very like bad for all of us as individuals anyways. So we have good people like you who are helping us, protect our communities, by what you guys are doing. And there's nothing better than to actually, okay, so we have the bad people isolated, and then we have us outside. But then if they're going to eventually come outside, they must be rehabilitated because they're coming to the, us good people side, I guess I'm nervous. So what I was saying is that we just have to pay it forward for everybody. A simple hello, simple good morning, simple how are you doing? You look nice today to anybody. Trust me, you don't know what that means. You don't know what that person's going through, but that's like that will have a great impact on them no matter what. There's this thing that I was thinking about the other day is like, what really makes us an adult? Is it an age that you're like given? You're 18, you're an adult now, you're, whatever. I learned from Dr. Lowry that, she's a great professor. Your brain doesn't fully develop for some cases when you're 25, and and some people it's different because we grow differently. I'm 26 now, and it's like I don't feel like I'm gonna be whatever society defines as an adult to be until maybe when I'm like 30. I'm trying to find a job. I'm not in jail, and I am trying to find a job, and I can't find. And I found out, but I'm busy in school now, so maybe I'm not trying that hard. But I find out that 79% of people now are like, there's a movement because there's no work anyways for anybody, and it's great. That's what we need. We need somebody to like help us with everything, because like a child, all we need is support and to feel secure and that we're welcomed, and that's it. You're good. This child will be loyal to you the rest of your life. Same thing with an adult. So keep an open mind when you're dealing with anybody, always, because that's how you'll learn more. You may think like, oh, this is violence. No, you don't know violence until you really talk to a little kid openly what is violence to him and things like that, rather than asking like, questions that are like, oh, so what is violence to you? No, you ask open-ended questions. So what happened to you? Tell me this, tell me that, But trust is the most important thing in this world, and that's it. Just help each other out.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Walker. I'm pursuing a PhD here in International Crime and Justice, and I'm also the chapter secretary for the Alpha Phi Sigma Criminal Justice Honor Society chapter here. So if anybody's interested in joining, reach out to me. I have two questions. The first one kind of deals with reentry. During my legal issues class, they kind of brought up the point that like a lot of the things that they do to inmates after they come out, so like the loss of a Pell Grant or the loss of the right to vote or the loss of government assistance that you can apply for constitutes as double jeopardy. So you go to jail to serve your time, but then when you're coming out, you're still being punished. So I want to know what your opinion on that is. Do you think it should be considered illegal to have all these, I guess, post-punishments towards inmates? And then my second question would be, pertains to how we spend our resources, because that seems to be a lot of the issue. How do you go about swaying public opinion, because I do believe public opinion plays a big role. How do you go about swaying public opinion from programs that are flashy but don't work, such as Scared Straight and DARE programs that have been proven to work, but everybody sees them as being good, to programs that have been proven to work, but everyone sees it as, oh, you're helping prisoners, and we don't want to do that. So those are my 2 questions.
By the way, I work for Alpha Phi Sigma. I'm a secretary for Alpha Phi Sigma. I'm grateful for that. I'm glad that you're here to represent. I'm glad you brought that up because, at least with the first question I want to apply to. Now, I do believe that there needs to, obviously, I've said it before, there needs to be some kind of help for the people inside. But I don't want people to think that I'm losing track of the thing that most of us deserve to go in there. We did some bad things. And I've learned there's a theory now called the aged out theory. I just always got tired of beating my head up against the wall. And sometimes people have to reach that. So there needs to be programs in there to help them reach that point of aged out or beating their head up against the wall to get that point. So I'm not saying that I don't want to lose track of what I've done and what other people have done. And I'm not saying everybody should just be given a blanket of help with everything. But now, going back, I will tell you something. I know that I have above average intelligence. I'm not a genius, but I've seen the scores. I've been better prepared than most. I've got a greater support group than most. But on day 1, I saw a menu and I was intimidated. And somebody says, you can have what you want. I said, just pick something. Give me something, because I was intimidated by the menu. They asked me if I wanted to pay for a milkshake. I says no, because I looked at the cash register and I was scared. I could go on and on and on. 3 years later, I'm still dealing with things like that. So getting back to think about the help with reentry, there's a lot of different areas of help with reentry that people meet, and some of them could be as simple as that. How to deal with the cash register. So I'm going to say, I did want to qualify a thing about what we did. Some of us deserve to be there. Some people need to stay there. And that's the truth. But we do need the reentry help. And that's one of the areas right there.
Your question was really involved and deep, and there was a bunch there. But one thing I wanted to say was, when our philosophy, we partnered up with anti-gang strategy in the beginning of whenever I established eStop. And Wayne Rollins is the director, whatever you call him, some high title of that. And there's a lot of things going on in the community that I learned from him about. And what I want to say shortly, because it's the whole crux of our philosophy, is that, you know, that phrase about teaching someone to fish. Let's see, don't give them the fish, but teach them to fish, something like that. Anyway, there's a philosophy in the Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring Program that we started, and we're broadening its compass, is that when we sit with people that are incarcerated, or they're returning, or they returned, or before, whatever, but mostly right now they're incarcerated. When we sit with them and have our Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring sessions, we do not go in there to lecture. We don't go in and say, we know this and you do this and da-da-da. We bring up any issue that needs to be brought up, and we set up a structure. It's hard to explain, but we set up a structure wherein the people that are incarcerated, the kids, we are showing them how to understand where they've been, what they've done, and what are we going to do with it. And then they come up with ways. They know what's going on. They know what they need, like the menu, or simple things. They know this, and they know what's going to happen when they go back to their community. They know. So we ask, and we say, okay, what can we do about it? So we may have power or something we may know people in the community, let's say networking. But are those networks working with the people that are incarcerated, and are we helping them reach their goals? Because they don't want to come out and be thrown to the wind again. I don't know if I'm making sense, but this is, I think, and we do this at ECI as well, with the Positive Peer Leadership Mentoring with men in there who are the gang leaders of the entire prison, and they want to change and they want to know what to do. So they're developing initiatives, and we're helping them take place. They're publishing a book, so we're helping them do it. See what I mean? Like, they're thinking of what can we do to prove to the world that we're different, we want to change, but we need their support. It's really exciting, and it's not like a lecturing, demeaning thing. That just doesn't make sense at all to me, and I think it's maybe what people are saying.
Great, thank you. I wore a watch for the first time in a few months today, so I know that we are just about out of the time we have allocated for this. So it's a great opportunity to have everyone in this room. So I totally encourage our panelists and students alike, once we wrap up here, to introduce yourself to each other and continue to collaborate. And if you have questions for them, please come up and ask them. But on behalf of myself, my office, and my university, I want to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to come talk to us today. And again, this is the beginning, not the end of this session. We'll be in touch about ways you can volunteer. We're going to see how we can get all these groups working together. And please stick around for a few minutes and continue to network and chat with one another. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for